just we'll start. I'll stop and I'll let her in. So for now, let's just start in a comfortable, easy seat. So you can have either one heel in front of the other, or you can have you can sit cross-legged, whatever's comfortable for you. If you want to put blocks under your knees or anything to make yourself a little more comfortable would be great. If you want to move the flesh away from the sit bones so you're sitting more firmly in the mat. And for now, let's just focus on the breath, straightening the spine and lifting the crown of the head. And really soften the belly and allow the belly to expand with every inhalation. Notice if you're breathing through the chest at all. And it's okay if the air comes in through the chest. See if you can let it fill the belly as well. Eyes can be opened or closed or semi-closed. Just notice the breath coming in and the breath going out. And then from here, whether the eyes are opened or closed, we're going to inhale and lift the arms up overhead. And then interlace the fingers, turn them inside out, and press up as you exhale. Then we'll inhale again. And then as we exhale, slowly release. We'll do that one more time. Inhaling the arms up overhead, interlacing the fingers, pressing up as you exhale. Another inhale, and then exhale and release. And then we'll inhale and lift the right arm up. For you, maybe the left, depends on whether you're mirroring or not. And then as we exhale, we'll start to walk over to the left side and reach over with the right hand. You can press that left arm into the mat so that you don't crunch down on the left side. Just take a full few deep breaths here. Gaze can be up at the ceiling, straight ahead, or even looking down. On your next inhale, we're going to reach up and around and come to the other side. And again, you'll start to crawl the arm over to the right and reaching up and over with the left arm. Full deep breaths here. Really allow the belly to expand fully. And on the next inhale, we'll reach up and over with the left arm, come back to center. Then we'll inhale and take the right arm and cross over to the left knee and just do a gentle twist over to the left. Lift the chest slightly as you inhale and twist as you exhale. Not too far. Then on your next exhalation, we'll slowly turn towards the front. Inhale and take the left hand, cross it over to the right knee, and as you exhale, turn and look over the right shoulder. Lifting the chest slightly as you inhale and then twisting as you exhale. Then on the next exhalation, very slowly we will turn back towards the front. And then we'll take the legs out in front. And here you can put something under your knees, like sometimes I use the corner of a block, like that. Or if you have a hand towel handy, no pun intended, you can roll up the hand towel, and you can put one under each knee. You can fold them any way you like. This is especially nice to cause a little, to have a little less strain on the hamstrings, and also if you have any lower back issues or anything like that. So from here, the toes are pointing up towards the ceiling. We're inhaling up, and then we'll just do an easy forward fold. Hands land where they land. If you can take yogi toe lock, that's fine. If not, just you can rest your hands on the shins or the thighs. Full deep breaths. Slowly we'll start to make our way up. You can bring your hands to the outside of the legs and just gently walk yourself back up. And from here you can either keep your legs straight out in front, or if you'd like to sit cross-legged again, you can. That's just an option. Let's take a few shoulder circles here. We'll go in one direction a few times, and then switch directions. And then let's take the hands onto the tops of the shoulders. We'll do a few more, and this time bringing the elbows toward each other and making wider circles. And then after you've done about 3 or 4-ish, we'll switch direction again. Beautiful. Now we'll take the arms back down. And then once again, paying attention to your posture, lifting the crown of the head so that the spine is straight. From here, we'll inhale, and then let your head gently fall over to the left as you exhale so that the ear becomes, or feels like it's becoming parallel with the shoulder. Full deep breaths. And then we'll inhale back up to center. And then we'll exhale over to the other side. And don't feel like you have to match your breath with mine. If I say inhale and you're not there yet, just wait until yours comes. So you're not struggling to keep up with my breath. And your next inhale will come back to center. And then as you exhale, we'll come back to the first side. And then gently turn your head and look down. Now here you could take the right arm and place it behind your back if you want a little bit more, to get more out of this stretch, and you should feel it along the back side of the neck. And then slowly, on your next inhale, we'll start to come back up to center and then releasing the arm. Then on the next exhale, we'll turn again to the other side and then turn and look down again. And if you want, you can take the left arm behind you. Just an option. And then slowly on your next inhalation, we'll start to come back to center. And then once again, we'll inhale. And as you exhale, let the chin fall towards the chest. So here we're going to do a few half rounds. So as you inhale, you're going to let your head turn to one side and start to roll up the side all the way up until you're feeling that ear become parallel with the shoulder again. And then as you exhale, you'll turn and look down and allow your head to slowly roll back to the center, chin to chest. And on the next inhale, you'll roll up the other side, just until the ear comes parallel with the shoulder again. And then as you exhale, once again looking down and allowing the head to roll back to center. Let's do one more round of this. Inhaling, rolling the head all the way up, ear to shoulder. And then exhaling and looking down and gently rolling back to center. Inhaling and rolling up to the other side, ear to shoulder. And then exhaling, looking down, chin to chest. And then slowly lift the neck again as you inhale. And let's take our feet and do a few circles with our ankles, a few ankle rotations. And then you can switch direction. Okay. So now, let's get into our first restorative pose. We're going to do a version of butterfly. There are a few ways that we can do this. So if you'd like to take a traditional butterfly, you can bring the feet together, you can bring them in close to the body, or at any distance that you like. But another option, that's a lot more fun, is to take one block on the floor and then another block between the feet. Again, any distance. And then your bolster will come to rest and if this is too low for any reason for you to fold forward comfortably, you can add blankets to add a little bit of height. So feel free to build up whatever you need to build up using pillows, cushions, whatever you have is fine. If you have a bed pillow, you can fold it in half lengthwise, maybe put a blanket on top. And a couple of options here for resting are you can have the hands in front of you and rest on the forearms, or you can let your arms rest on the legs and maybe turn to one cheek. And then at one point I will let you know to turn the other cheek. Haha, there's another pun. So go ahead and get comfortable. And while you get comfortable, I will get my book. So tonight we're reading Siddartha, and I'm super excited about this. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'll move the mics a bit closer. Siddartha by Hermann Hesse. Siddartha, the handsome son of the Brahmin, the young falcon, grew up together with his friend Govinda, the Brahmin's son, in the shadow of the house, in the sun of the riverbank near the boats, in the shadow of the Sala forest, and in the shadow of the fig trees. The sun tanned his fair shoulders on the riverbank while he bathed during the holy cleansing at the holy sacrifices. Shadows flocked into his black eyes in the mango grove during the boyish games when his mother sang at the holy sacrifices, during the teaching of his father, the scholar, and when speaking with the wise ones. For a long time, Siddartha had taken part in the wise ones' discussions. He had practiced word wrestling with Govinda, had practiced the art of contemplation and the duty of meditation with Govinda. He already understood how to speak the Om silently, that word of words, how to speak it silently in his inner being as he inhaled, how to pronounce it silently out of himself as he exhaled, how to do so with his whole soul while his forehead was enveloped by the radiance of the clear thinking mind. He already understood how to recognize Atman within this inner essence of his that was indestructible and one with the universe. Joy sprang up in his father's heart over the son who was so apt to learn and so thirsty after knowledge. He saw growing within him a great sage and priest, a prince among the Brahmins. Delight welled up in his mother's heart when she saw him taking long strides, saw him sitting down and standing up. Siddartha, the strong and handsome, who strode upon lean legs and who greeted her with impeccable manners. All the young daughters of the Brahmins felt love stirring within their hearts when Siddartha walked through the side streets of the city with a beaming face, a lean physique, and a royal look in his eyes. Govinda, the Brahmin's son, however, loved him more than all of these. He loved the eye of Siddartha and his sweet voice, his gait and the perfection of his movements. He loved everything that Siddartha did and said, and above all, he loved Siddartha's mind, his sublime and fiery thoughts, his blazing will, and Siddartha's high calling. Govinda knew that this would be no ordinary Brahmin, no lazy official presiding over the sacrifices, no money-grubbing merchant hawking magic trinkets, no vain and vacuous speaker, no wicked and lying priest, and also not a good-hearted but dim-witted sheep in the plebeian herds. Govinda didn't want to be such a person either, didn't want to be a Brahmin, like all the 10,000 other Brahmins. He wanted to follow Siddartha, who was beloved and majestic. When Siddartha first became a god, when he entered into the radiance, then Govinda wanted to follow him as his friend, his escort, his servant, his spear carrier, and his shadow. In this manner, everyone loved Siddartha. He brought everyone joy. He pleased everyone. However, Siddartha didn't bring himself joy. He didn't please himself. He strolled on the rosy paths of the fig gardens, sat in the blue shadows of the grove of meditation, washed his limbs daily in baths of atonement, and sacrificed in the deep shadows of the mango forest. Everyone loved him. He was joyous to them, and he carried no joy in his own heart. Dreams and restless thoughts came flowing to him out of the river's water, twinkled to him from the stars of the night, melted out of the sunbeams. Dreams and anxiety came billowing out of the sacrificial smoke, whispering from the verses of the Rig Veda or trickling out of the old Brahmin's teachings. Siddartha had started to cultivate the seed of discontent within himself. He had started to feel like his father's love, his mother's love, and the love of his friend Govinda wouldn't make him happy forever, wouldn't bring him peace, satisfy him, and be sufficient for all time. He had started to suspect that his illustrious father, his other teachers, and the wise Brahmins had shared the majority and the best of their wisdom with him, that they had already poured their all into his ready vessel without filling the vessel. The mind wasn't satisfied. The soul wasn't quiet. The heart wasn't stilled. The purifications were nice, but they were just water and didn't wash away sins. They didn't cure the mental thirst or allay his heart's anxiety. Sacrifices and invocations to the gods were superb. But were they sufficient? Did the sacrifices bring happiness? And what about all those gods? Was Prajapati really the one who had created the world? Wasn't it Atman, he who was the only one, the all one? Weren't the gods creatures created just like you and I were, subject to time and transitory? Was it even good? Was it right? Did it make sense? Or was it important to sacrifice to the gods? To whom else would one sacrifice? To whom else should one bring worship other than him, the only, the Atman? And where could Atman be found? Where did he live? Where did his eternal heart beat? Where else other than in the self, in one's inner being, in the indestructible part of each person that they carried within themselves? But where was this self? Where was this inner being, this most paramount thing? It was not made of flesh or the legs that carried it. It wasn't just the thoughts or the awareness, or so taught the wisest men. Where then was it? One had to penetrate that far into the self, into myself, into the Atman. Was there some other way, however, a search which still yielded worthwhile results? But nobody pointed to this way. Nobody knew it. Not Father, not the teachers and wise ones, not the holy chants sung during sacrifices. They knew everything, those Brahmins and their holy books. They knew everything. They had concerned themselves with everything and with more than everything. The creation of the world, the origins of language, of foods, of inhalation and exhalation, the institution of the senses, the deeds of the gods. They knew an inordinate amount, and yet it was worthwhile to know everything like this when one didn't know the one and only thing that was most important, that which alone was important. At this point, if you'd like to turn your head to the other side to give your neck a little break, this would be a good time. To be sure, many verses from the holy books, especially the Upanishads of the Samaveda, spoke about these innermost and most important things, majestic verses. Your soul is the whole world was written there. It was also written that the person who slept in the deepest slumber went within to their innermost place and lived in Atman. Wonderful wisdom stood within these verses. All the wisdom of the wisest. Oh, sorry. I got a text and it distracted me. It's amazing. Wonderful wisdom stood within these verses. All the wisdom of the wisest was gathered there in the magical words, pure like the honey gathered by the bees. No, the behemoth of knowledge that innumerable generations of wise Brahmins had gathered and protected there wasn't to be lightly esteemed. But where were the Brahmins? Where were the priests, the wise ones and the penitents, those who were successful in not only knowing this deepest wisdom, but also living in it? Where were the elders who could merge this Atman of their dreams with the waking being, to bring it fully into their lives and into their words and deeds? Siddartha knew many venerable Brahmins, not the least of whom was his father, who was pure, scholarly, and highly esteemed. His father was admirable. His habits were quiet and elegant, his life pure, his words wise, and the thoughts that inhabited his brow were both fine and noble. But did he who possessed so much wisdom live a blessed life? Did he have joy? Wasn't he also a mere seeker, one who had thirst? Did not he, who had thirst, have to receive a holy quenching of this thirst by drinking time and time again at the sacrifices, at the books, at the conversations of the Brahmins? Why did he, who was irreproachable, have to wash out his sins every day, have to expend great effort once more to attain purification each and every day? Wasn't Atman him? Didn't the ancient spring flow in his heart? The ancient spring must be found in one's own self. One must own it. Everything else was just a search, a detour. It was to go astray. Thus went Siddartha's thoughts. This was his thirst, his sorrow. He often spoke to himself out of the Chandogya Upanishad. Verily, the name of the Brahmin is Satyam, in truth. One who knows this enters daily into the heavenly world. This heavenly world often appeared close, but he had never totally reached it. Never had he quenched the ultimate thirst. Furthermore, all the wise ones whom he knew those teaching he had savored, even the wisest among them, all there were none who had totally reached the heavenly world, who had completely quenched the eternal thirst. Govinda, said Siddartha to his friend, Govinda, beloved, come with me among the banyan trees, and we will practice meditating. They went to the banyan trees and sat down. Here Siddartha and Govinda 20 paces farther. When Siddartha sat down, ready to speak the Om, he murmured and repeated the verse. Om is the bow, the arrow is the soul. The Brahman is the arrow's goal. That one should continuously hit. When the usual time for practicing meditation had passed, Govinda rose up. The twilight had come, and it was time to perform the cleansing of the evening hour. He called Siddartha's name. Siddartha gave no answer. Siddartha sat with his eyes open, immersed, staring with his eyes fixed upon a very far goal. The tip of his tongue stuck out a little between his teeth, and he didn't appear to be breathing. Thus he sat, shrouded in meditation, thinking Om. His soul sent out like an arrow after the Brahmin. Once, the Samanas pulled through Siddartha's town. They were pilgrims and ascetics, 3 scraggly, worn-out men who were neither old nor young, with dusty and bloody shoulders. They were nearly naked, singed by the sun, given over to loneliness, strangers and enemies of the world, and estranged, gaunt jackals in the domain of mankind. From behind them wafted a hot scent of quiet passion, of a duty that destroys, of a merciless self-effacing. I'm going to pause here so that we can gently start to move from this position. I'm hoping that no one is getting any numbness in their legs or anything. The next pose will be the opposite. We'll set up the bolster behind us. And again, you can use the blocks if you'd like a little bit of lift. You can set one down flat and one a little bit higher. Or you can set one on the medium height and one on a taller height. Let me see if I have more blocks here. You can use as many blankets as you'd like. And here you can keep the legs together if you like that, or you can take the legs out in front. And then you'll bring your lower back right up against the bolster and just gently start to lay back. And then you'll see if you need something else underneath your head or not, and you can make those adjustments. Maybe you'll need to fold a blanket a little bit more. Maybe you need to just move the blanket. Just let yourself get really comfy. Your hands can be either out by your sides, or you can place one hand over the heart and one over the belly if you'd like. And feel free to close your eyes. In the evening, after the hour of contemplation, Siddartha said to Govinda, "Early tomorrow, my friend, Siddartha will go to the samanas. He will become a samana." Govinda paled when he heard these words and saw the resolution in the stony face of his friend, a revolution that, like the swiftest arrow let loose from the bow, could never be deflected. As soon as Govinda glimpsed this, he recognized. Now it begins. Now Siddartha goes his own way. Now his fate begins to sprout, and with his, mine. Govinda paled like the peel of a dry banana. "Oh, Siddartha," he called, "will your father allow you to do that?" Siddartha glanced at his friend like one just waking up. As quickly as the arrow flies, he read Govinda's soul. He read the anxiety and the devotion there. "Oh, Govinda," he said quietly, "don't waste any words on this. Tomorrow at daybreak, I will begin a samana's life. Don't discuss this anymore." Siddartha stepped in the chamber where his father sat on a raffia mat and walked behind his father, standing there until his father sensed that someone was standing behind him. The Brahmin spoke. "Is that you, Siddartha?" "Well, say what you have come here to say." Siddartha spoke. "With your permission, my father, I have come to say to you that I am desirous of leaving your house tomorrow and going to the ascetics. My wish is to become a samana. May my father not be opposed to this." The Brahmin was silent, and silent so long that in the little window the stars wandered and changed their configuration before the silence in the chamber found an end. Silent and still, the sun stood with crossed arms. Silent and still, the father sat on the mat, and the stars moved in the heavens. Then the father spoke. "It is not fitting for the Brahmins to speak with severe and scornful words. Yet I see displeasure moving in your heart. I would not like to hear this request come out of your mouth a second time." Slowly the Brahmin raised himself. Siddartha, mute with crossed arms, stood there. "What are you waiting for?" asked the father. Spoke Siddartha. "You know what for." Displeased, the father went out of the chamber. Displeased, he sought his bed and lay down. After an hour during which no sleep came to his eyes, the Brahmin stood up, paced to and fro, and stepped out of the house. Through the little window of the chamber he looked in, and saw that Siddartha stood there with crossed arms, unmoved. His lightweight outer garments shimmered with a pale light. Restless at heart, the father returned to his bed. After an hour during which no sleep came to his eyes, the Brahmin stood up again, paced to and fro, stepped in front of the house, and saw the moon, which had risen. Through the window of the chamber he glanced inside. There stood Siddartha, unmoved, with crossed arms, and the moonlight mirrored on his bare shins. The father, concerned in his heart, sought his bed. And he came again after an hour, and came again after 2 hours. He glanced through the little window, saw Siddartha standing in the moonlight, in the starshine, and in the darkness. And the father silently came again from hour to hour, glanced in the chamber, saw the immobile person standing there, then filled his heart with rage, filled his heart with disquietude, filled his heart with anxiety, and filled it with sorrow. And in the last hour of the night, before the day began, he turned again, came into the chamber, and saw standing there the young boy that now appeared so large and strange to him. "Siddartha," said he, "what are you waiting for?" "You know what for." "Will you always stand like this and wait until it becomes day, becomes noon, becomes evening?" "I will stand and wait." "You will become tired, Siddartha." "I will become tired." "You will fall asleep, Siddartha." "I will not fall asleep." "You will die, Siddartha." "I will die." "And you would rather die than listen to your father?" Siddartha has always listened to his father. "So you want to give up your intentions?" Siddartha will do what his father is going to tell him to do. The first sunshine of the day fell upon the chamber. The Brahmin saw that Siddartha's knees were gently trembling. In Siddartha's face, however, he saw no trembling. The eyes looked far away. Then the father realized that Siddartha had already gone from him and his household, that he had already left him. The father touched Siddartha's shoulder. "You will," he said, "go in the woods and be a samana. If you have found blessedness in the woods, then come and teach me how to be blessed. If you find disappointment, then return once more and let us once again sacrifice to the gods together. Now go and kiss your mother. Tell her where you are going. For me, however, it is time to go to the river and perform the first cleansing." He took his hand from his son's shoulder and went outside. Siddartha swayed to one side as if he wanted to go. He conquered his limbs, bowed down before his father, and went to his mother in order to do as his father had said. At dawn, he slowly and with stiff legs left the still quiet city. At the last hut, he saw a shadow that was crouching down there rise up and join him, the new pilgrim, Govinda. "You have come, Siddartha," said Siddartha as he smiled. "I have come," said Govinda. With the samanas. They caught up with the ascetics, the scraggly samanas, in the evening of that same day, and they offered to accompany them and obey them. They were accepted. Siddartha gave his robe as a gift to a poor Brahmin along the road. Siddartha wore only a loincloth and an unstitched, earth-colored shawl. He ate only once a day, and never ate anything cooked. He fasted for 15 days. He fasted for 28 days. The flesh on his thighs and cheeks dwindled away. From his enlarged eyes flickered hot dreams. The nails grew long on his dried-out fingers, and he had a dry, unkempt beard on his chin. When he encountered females, his gaze was frigid. When they went through a city where the men were handsomely clothed, his mouth twitched with contempt. He saw merchants conduct trade, princes go on their hunts, mourners bemoan deaths, whores offer their services, doctors tend to their sick, priests specify which days were good for sowing seed, lovers love, mothers shush their children, and nothing was worth even the glance of his eyes. Everything was a lie. Everything stank. Everything stank of lies. Everything feigned meaning and happiness and beauty, and yet everything was decaying while nobody acknowledged the fact. The world tasted bitter. Life was agony. One goal loomed before Siddartha, and only one: to become empty. To be empty of thirst, of wishing, of dreams. Empty of all joy and pain. He wanted the self to die, to no longer be an I, to find peace with an empty heart. His goal was to stand open to the wonder of thoughts conceived in self-dissolution, when every shred of his self had been conquered and put to death, when every longing and every inclination of the heart had been silenced, then the ultimate had to awaken. That which was innermost had to come into being. That which was nothing less than the ago, the great secret. I'm going to pause again here, and we're going to shift once again. Take your time in making your way back up to sitting. And we'll start to move the bolster to one side. So you'll come to sit on the heels first. Oh, I'll wait. Sorry, I'm going too fast. Let's go slow. So with your bolster on your side, you'll be sitting on your heels, and then you'll just gently slide off. And then your right foot, sorry, you can't see my feet, but one foot will end up sort of sliding into the arch of the other foot. It'll be a comfortable movement. And then from here, you'll turn the body, so this is a twist, and you'll lay down on your bolster, and you can keep your head to any side that's comfortable for you. If you'd like, you can also lay on your forehead, or if you want a deeper twist, you can turn your neck to the opposite side. And you can change these at any time. Maybe if you have your head turned to one side, and after a minute or two you don't like how it feels, just shift to wherever you'll be more comfortable. Siddartha stood silently in the intense rays streaming vertically from the sun. Blazing with pain and blazing with thirst, he stood until he felt neither pain nor thirst any longer. He stood silently in the rain, while water dripped from his hair over his frozen shoulders, over his frigid hips and legs, and still the penitent stood there until his shoulders and legs were frozen no longer, until they became silent and were still. Silently he crouched down among the briar tendrils, while blood dripped from his burning skin and pus came from his lesions. Siddartha languished there without movement or any animation until the blood flowed no longer, until he felt nothing stinging or burning anymore. Siddartha sat upright and learned how to breathe sparingly, learned how to get by with little breath, and then learned how to halt his breathing. He learned, beginning with the breath, how to quiet his heartbeat, and then how to diminish his heart's beating until it was very little, and then was almost non-existent. Under the teaching of the oldest samanas, Siddartha mastered self-denial. practiced mystic contemplation according to the new methods of the samanas. A heron flew over the bamboo forest, and Siddartha took the heron into his soul. He flew over the woods and the mountains. He was a heron. He fed upon fish and hungered with the heron's hunger. He spoke the cawing of the heron and died the heron's death. A dead jackal lay there on the sandy riverbank, and Siddartha's soul slipped into the dead body. He was a dead jackal. He lay on the beach. He swelled up and stank. He rotted away and was dismembered by the hyenas before being skinned by the vultures. He turned to a skeleton and then to dust. And then he blew into the fields. And Siddartha's soul returned. His soul had died, it had decayed, it had crumbled to dust. He had tasted the hazy intoxication of the cycle of existence and, like the hunter poised for the opportunity, awaited his chance to escape from this cycle to the place where causality ended and an eternity free of sorrow began. He deadened his senses and dulled his memory. He slid out of his self-existence into 1,000 strange created things. He was an animal. He was a carrion. He was stone, wood, and water, and every time when he found himself awakened once more, whether the sun or moon was shining, he was once more himself within the cycle of existence. He felt thirst, he overcame his thirst, and then he felt new thirst. With the samanas, Siddartha learned quite a bit, and learned how to go away from the self in many ways. He followed the method of self-dissolution through pain, where he suffered voluntarily and overcame the pain, hunger, thirst, or fatigue. He achieved self-dissolution through meditation, by the concentrated clearing of all perceptions from his senses. He learned to go by these ways as well as others. He abandoned his being 1,000 times. He lingered in the not-self hours and days at a time. But although these paths led away from one's being, in the end they always led back to the self. Although Siddartha fled the self 1,000 times and tarried in nothing, although he spent time within animals and stones, the return was unavoidable. The hours where he found his own being were inescapable. Whether in shadows or in rain, he was once more Siddartha, and the agony of the cycle of existence was once again laid upon him. Govinda, his shadow, lived by his side. He followed this same path, and he himself undertook the same tasks. They seldom spoke more to one another than the service and practices required. At times, these two went through the villages so that they could beg sustenance for themselves and their teachers. "What do you think, Govinda?" said Siddartha once during these begging trips. "What do you think? Should we go further? Have we achieved our goal?" Govinda answered, "We have learned, and we continue to learn. You will be a great samana, Siddartha. You have learned every practice quickly, and the old samanas have often marveled at you. One day, you will be a saint, Siddartha." Siddartha spoke. "It doesn't look that way to me, my friend. The things that I have learned with the samanas up to this point, oh Govinda, I could have learned even easier and more quickly. I could have learned it in any pub located in the Wars district, there among the manual laborers and the gamblers, my friend." Govinda said, "Siddartha is joking with me. How could you have acquired meditation, and how could you have learned how to cease breathing? How could you have possessed immunity to hunger and pain there among all that is miserable?" And Siddartha spoke quietly, as if to himself. What is mystic contemplation? What is an out-of-body experience? What is the cessation of breath? Is it flight from one's being? It's a brief escape out of the agony of self-existence. It's a momentary anesthetic against the pain and meaningless of life. The ox driver could find this self-same flight. He could find the very same momentary anesthetic in the tavern when he drinks a couple of bowls of rice wine or fermented coconut milk. At that point, he no longer senses his self. He finds fleeting anesthesia. He, while falling into slumber over his bowl of rice wine, finds the same thing that Siddartha and Govinda find when they, after hours of practice, are able to journey outside of their bodies. So it is, O Govinda. Govinda spoke. So you say, O friend, but you know that Siddartha is no ox driver and that a samana is no drunkard. True, the drinker finds anesthesia. True, he finds short flight and respite. But he returns out of the illusion and finds everything just as it was before. He had not grown wiser. He has not gathered knowledge. He has not climbed one step higher. And Siddartha said, smiling, I don't know that I'm never going to become a drunkard. I only know that I, Siddartha, only find momentary numbness in my methods and meditations. I know that I am even as far removed from wisdom and deliverance as the child is while still cratered by his mother's love. This I know, O Govinda, this I know. At another time when Siddartha and Govinda left the woods, in order to beg for some nourishment for their brothers and teachers in a village, Siddartha began to speak, saying, How now, Govinda, are we truly on the right path? Are we really growing towards a realization? Or are we, perhaps, just going in circles? We who think at some point we shall escape the circle of existence? Govinda said, We have learned much, Siddartha, and much remains to be learned. We're not going in circles. We're going upwards. The circle is a spiral, and we have already climbed several steps. Siddartha answered, How old do you think our oldest samana, the one most worthy of honor, really is? Said Govinda, The oldest among us is perhaps 60 years. And Siddartha, He is 60 years old and has never reached nirvana. He will become 70 and 80, and you and I will also become old while practicing, fasting, and meditating. But we will not reach nirvana, just as he will not. O Govinda, I believe that, among all the samanas in existence, not even a single one will reach nirvana. We may find consolation or numbness, or may learn genuine skills with which we can deceive ourselves, but the fundamental thing, that way of ways, we do not find. At this point, if you'd like to switch sides, I invite you to do that. You may enjoy twisting on the other side. Take your time. I'll just continue reading, and you can choose whatever is best for you. On the contrary, said Govinda, you should not speak such outrageous words, Siddartha. Are you saying we will find no way of ways? Among so many learned men, Brahmins and seekers, among so many sincerely zealous and holy men, or among so many strong and venerable samanas? Siddartha then said in a voice that contained scoffing and sadness, in a voice that was quiet, somewhat sad, and somewhat mocking, Soon, Govinda, your friend will leave the samana's path that he has traveled for so long with you. Unfortunately, I thirst, O Govinda, and on this long path of the samana, my thirst has dwindled until it has become nothing. I have always thirsted after enlightenment. I am always becoming full of questions. I have asked the Brahmins and the holy Vedas year after year. O Govinda, perhaps it would have been just as good, just as intelligent, and just as efficacious if I had asked the rhinoceros, birds, or the chimpanzees. It has required a great deal of time, and even now I have not come to the end of the journey of learning this fact, O Govinda, that man can learn nothing. The thing that we call learning is, in truth, non-existent. It is inherent, O my friend, in a knowledge that is everywhere, that is Atman. It is in me and in you and in every essence. I am starting to believe that this knowledge has no more aggressive enemy than learning and the desire for knowledge. Govinda remained on the road, standing there. He raised his hands and said, "You shouldn't alarm your friend with such conversations. Your words truly stir up worry within my heart. Just think, what would lend holiness to one's prayers? What would make the Brahmin class worthy of honor? What would make the Samanas holy if, as you say, there is no learning? What would all of these be, O Siddartha, in such a case? What would be holy? What would be worthwhile? What would be venerable?" Govinda then murmured a verse out of the Upanishad. "Whosoever immerses themselves in Atman through contemplation and a purified spirit will receive ineffable blessing in their heart." Siddartha, however, remained silent. He thought about the words Govinda had spoken to him and considered them until their conclusion. Yes, he thought, while he stood there, with a lowered head, what still remains of it all? What appears holy to us? What remains? What is worth doing? He then shook his head. One time, when both lads had lived with the Samanas and shared their practices for about 3 years, a rumor, an adage arrived to them through various highways and byways. One named Gautama has appeared, the sublime, the Buddha, who has overcome the world's anguish within himself and has brought the wheel of rebirth to a standstill. He was surrounded by disciples as he went through the land, teaching. He was without possessions, homeless, womanless, wearing the yellow mantle of an ascetic, but with a cheerful visage. He was a saint. Princes and Brahmins bowed down before him and wanted to sit under his tutelage. This tale, this rumor, this fairy tale resonated outwards, wafted upwards, and traveled here and there. The Brahmins spoke about these things in the cities. The Samanas did so in the woods. The name of Gautama, the Buddha, hammered upon the ears of young lads and time again. They heard both good and bad reports about Gautama. They heard both adulation and abuse. Just like it is in a land where the pestilence is raging and tidings go forth, here or there is a man, a sage, a harbinger whose words or whose breath, when they fell upon a person, were sufficient for healing the plague. And just as every person spoke about these reports running rampant throughout in the land, with many believing and doubting, while others immediately went on their way to seek help from the wise man, in this same way went out every tale and aromatic report of Gautama, the Buddha, the wise man of the Sakya clan. According to the believers, he possessed the highest knowledge. He could recall his previous lives. He had reached nirvana and would not return time and again to the circle of existence. He did not submerge himself any longer in the turbulent streams of mortal beings. Many majestic and unbelievable things were reported of him. He had done miracles. He had overcome the devil. He had spoken with the gods. His enemies and the unbelievers, however, said that this Gautama was a vain seducer. They said he lived extravagantly, that he despised the sacrifices, that he had no learning and had intimate knowledge of neither customs nor the caste system. The tales of the Buddha sounded sweet. The reports had the scent of magic. The world was certainly sick, and life was difficult to endure. And see, here a fountain appeared to spring up. Here a clarion call appeared to sound that was trustworthy, mild and full of elegant promises. Everywhere that the rumor of the Buddha cropped up, in every place in the lands of India, the lads pricked up their ears. They felt a deep longing of the heart. They felt hope. Among the sons of the Brahmin, and in every city and village, a pilgrim or stranger was welcome when he brought news of him who was sublime, the Sakyamuni. The tales slowly permeated to the samanas in the woods as well as to Siddartha and Govinda. The tales came slowly. They trickled in drops that were heavy with hope and heavy with doubt. They spoke little about these things, as the oldest samana was no friend of these tales. He had heard that the one everyone looked upon as the Buddha had previously been an ascetic in the woods, but had turned back to pursue luxury and the world's lusts, and he had little regard for this Gautama. "O Siddartha," Govinda said at one point to his friend, "today I was in the village, and a Brahmin invited me to step into his house. In his house was a Brahmin's son from Magadha, who had seen the Buddha with his own eyes and had heard his teachings. Truly, the breath in my breast failed me. And I thought to myself, how I would like us both, Siddartha and I, to experience the hour when we would hear the teachings proceed from the mouth of this perfect one. Speak, friend. Don't we want to go there and listen to the teachings that come from the Buddha's mouth?" Siddartha said, "I had always thought, O Govinda, that you would remain with the samanas. I have always believed that it was your goal to become 60 or 70 years old, pursuing all the while the methods and means that adorn the samanas. But I see. I had known too little of Govinda. I had known little of your true heart. Now, all right, as you wish, most precious one, open forth a path and go ahead on it. Go where the Buddha proclaims his teachings." Govinda said, "You love to mock it. You shall mock it regardless, Siddartha. Don't you also desire? Doesn't a yearning also awaken within you to hear this teaching? Didn't you once say to me that it wouldn't be long before you left the way of the samanas?" We're going to pause here and start to shift gears one more time. It's hard to stop because it's such an engaging story. So the next pose is similar to what you just did. You won't have to move too much. But basically, it's a child's pose with the bolster. So instead of a twist, you'll just bring the bolster between your knees. And if you'd like to pad it up with blankets and whatever you'd like, you'll just lay on it like this, starting with the head to one side, and then after a few minutes, turning the head to the other side. And if you fall asleep, don't worry about it. You'll have a good nap. Siddartha laughed at this. He laughed and his voice took on a shadow of sorrow and mockery. He said, "Truly, Govinda, you have spoken truly and have remembered correctly. Would that you had remembered the other things you have heard me say as well, namely, that I have become skeptical and tired about teaching and learning, and that my trust in words that come from teachers is small. But nevertheless, dear one, I am ready to hear every teaching, even though I in my heart believe that we have already gleaned the best fruits from every teaching. Govinda spoke. Your readiness to do so strikes joy in my heart. But say, how is it that possible? How could the teaching of Gautama have already developed its best fruit before we have ever examined it? Siddartha said, let's savor this fruit and save the rest of it for later, Govinda. We already owe the Gautama thanks for this fruit, however, and it lies in the fact that he is calling us away from the samanas. Whether he has other things to give us, O friend, well, let us wait for this with quieted hearts. On this same day, Siddartha gave the oldest samana his decision, that he would leave. He let the elder know with the politeness and decorum that was fitting for disciples and scholars. The samana, however, approached him in scorn because both of the lads were leaving. He spoke loudly and used coarse insults. Govinda was shocked and became embarrassed. Siddartha, however, leaned his mouth over to Govinda's ear and whispered to him, now I will show the old one that I have learned something from him. At this, Siddartha took up a position in front of the samana and gathered his thoughts. He captured the elder's gaze with his own, entranced him, made him be silent, and drained him of his will. Siddartha conquered the elder's will, making the elder do what he wanted. The old man became silent as his eyes stared. He was paralyzed, and his arms hung down. The feeble elder was shot out of the sky by Siddartha's spellbinding. Siddartha's thoughts seized hold of the samana, and he had to perform the actions imposed upon him. So the elder bowed down several times, completing this blessed gesture fully, and then stammered a devout wish for good travels. The lads reciprocated this wish, likewise bowing down with thanks as they walked away and bid him farewell. As they went on their way, Govinda said, O Siddartha, you have learned more among the samanas than I knew. It is very difficult indeed to bewitch an older samana. Had you remained there, you truly would have learned to walk on water before too long. I don't have any desire to walk on water, said Siddartha. Let the old samanas satisfy themselves with such tricks. Gautama. Every child in the town of Savatthi knew the name of the exalted Buddha, and every house was prepared to fill the alms dishes of the silent beggars who were Gautama's disciples. Gautama's favorite place to stay was near the town, the grove of Jetavana. The wealthy merchant, I have to practice this in my head, Anathapindika, that's beautiful. The wealthy merchant, Anathapindika, an obedient worshipper of the Exalted One, had given this grove as a gift to Gautama and his people. As the two young ascetics had searched for Gautama's dwelling place, the responses and the stories they had heard pointed them towards this area. Upon arriving in Savatthi, they received a meal at the door of the first house where they had stood and begged. Siddartha asked the woman who gave them the meal, You whose deeds are most gracious, we would be most glad to learn where the Buddha, who is venerable, spends his time. We are two samanas from the woods, and have come in order to see him who is the perfected one, and to hear the teachings from his mouth. The woman said, You samanas from the forest have certainly come to the right place. Know this, it is in Jetavana in the garden of Anathapindika that the Sublime One spends his time. You should spend the night there, pilgrims, because there is enough room there for the countless multitudes who flock here to hear the teachings from his mouth. Govinda rejoiced at this, and full of joy he exclaimed, "Well then, our goal has been reached and our path has come to an end. But tell us, you who are mother to the pilgrims, do you know him, the Buddha? Have you seen him with your eyes?" Spoke the woman, "Many times I have seen him who is sublime. I have seen him upon many occasions, how he goes silently through the alleyways in a yellow mantle, how he silently extends his bowl at the doors of houses, and how he carries the filled dish away." Govinda listened with delight, and still wanted to ask and hear about many things. But Siddartha was in a hurry to continue onwards. They thanked her and went on their way, hardly having to ask for directions because so many pilgrims and monks from Gautama's neighborhood were on their way to Jetavana. As they reached it that evening, there were constant arrivals, with people shouting or talking as they sought shelter and received it. The two samanas, who were used to living in the forest, silently and quickly found a place to stay and rested there until morning. I'm just going to pause and let you know to maybe turn your head to the other side and give your neck a little break. At sunrise, they were astounded to see such large throngs of believers and people who were curious who had spent the night there. Monks went to and fro in yellow robes on all the paths of the majestic grove. They sat here and there among the trees, immersed in contemplation or spiritual discussions. The shadowy gardens were like a city, full of people who were bustling like bees. Most of the monks went with their alms dishes to collect food in the city for the midday meal, the only meal of the day. The Buddha himself, the enlightened one, was also in the habit of taking this walk to beg in the morning. Siddartha recognized him as soon as he saw him, as if a god had pointed him out to him. He saw him, a simple man in a yellow robe, bearing the alms dish in his hand, walking silently. "See here," Siddartha, and quietly to Govinda. "This one here is the Buddha." Attentively, Govinda glanced at the monk in the yellow robe, who seemed no different from the hundreds of other monks. And soon Govinda also realized, this is the one, and they followed him and observed him. The Buddha went on his way, modestly and deep in his thoughts. His calm face was neither happy nor sad. It seemed to smile quietly and inwardly. With his hidden smile, the Buddha strolled on quietly, calmly, and not unlike a healthy child. He wore his robe and placed his feet, much like all the other monks did, according to an exact rule. But his face and his gait, his gaze lowered quietly, his motionless hands hanging down, and even every finger of his dangling hands bespoke peace, expressed perfection. They did not search or imitate, as they breathed softly with a calm that did not wither, with a light that did not fade, and with a peace that was intangible. In this way, Gautama strolled towards the town collecting alms, and the two samanas recognized him simply by the perfection of his peace, by the stillness of his being in which there was no seeking, no desire, no imitation, no attempts at being seen, only light and peace. "Today we will hear the teachings from his mouth," said Govinda. Siddartha gave no answer. He was slightly curious about this teaching. He did not believe that they would teach him anything new, but he, like Govinda, had heard the contents of this Buddha's teachings again and again. Through these reports only represented second or third-hand information. But attentively he looked at Gautama's head, his shoulders, his feet, his quietly dangling hand, and it seemed to Siddartha as if every joint of every finger of this hand was a teacher who spoke, breathed of, exhaled the fragrance of, and shone forth with truth. This man, this Buddha, was truthful down to the gesture of his last finger. This man was holy. Never before had Siddartha revered a person so much. Never before had he loved a person as much as this one. They both followed the Buddha until they reached the town, and then returned in silence, for they themselves had thought to abstain from food for the day. They saw Gautama returning. What he ate could not have even satisfied a bird's appetite, and they saw him retiring into the shade of the mango tree. But in the evening, when the heat cooled down and everyone in the camp started to bustle about and gather around, they heard the Buddha teaching. They heard his voice, and it was also perfected, wholly calm and full of peace. Gautama taught the lessons of suffering, of the origin of suffering, of ways to relieve suffering. Calmly and clearly, his quiet speech flowed on. Suffering was life. The whole world was full of suffering, but salvation from suffering had been found. Salvation was obtained by walking the path of the Buddha. The Exalted One spoke with a voice that was soft yet firm. He taught the four main doctrines and taught the Eightfold Path. He patiently followed the typical path of teaching by using examples and repetition. His voice hovered brightly and quietly over the listeners like a light, like a star in heaven. From here, my friends, I am going to stop the reading, and we're going to change positions one more time into Shavasana, and I invite you to either use your bolster or maybe a rolled up blanket under your knees, if that feels good for you. You could even place a little something under your head if you'd like. Maybe another folded blanket. I invite you to get nice and comfortable. You can either lay your hands out by your sides and with the palms facing up. You can cover yourself up with a blanket. And if you don't like a blanket or bolster under your knees, you don't have to do that, but it's a nice way to let the back rest as well. And so for now, just start to allow your body to sink into the mat. Let everything feel heavy and melty. And I decided that I would like to sing for you tonight. And originally I had planned on chanting a mantra that I love very much. But at the last minute, I decided, since it's my Easter today, and it's a holy day, I decided to sing you a Greek chant instead. And whether you're religious or not, it doesn't matter. You can just listen to the melody. It's very beautiful. And I hope you enjoy it. And allow yourself to just rest and see what comes up from this, okay? Christos anesti εκ νεκρών, θανάτων, θανάτων πατήσας και της εν της μνήμασι ζωήν χαρισάμενος. Χριστός ανέστη εκ νεκρών, θανάτων, θανάτων πατήσας και της εν της μνήμασι ζωήν χαρισάμενος. Χριστός ανέστη εκ νεκρών, θανάτων, θανάτων πατήσας και της εν της μνήμασι ζωήν this point, I invite you to bring your awareness back into the room, back into the space that you're in, back into your body. Maybe start by just taking a full deep breath. Perhaps wiggle fingers and toes. Maybe even taking the arms up overhead and giving yourself a full body stretch. And bend the knees, bring the feet to the mat, and in your own time, just roll over to the right and linger here a moment. While you are preparing to shift into sitting, to come up from the mat into sitting, and before we close out the practice, I just want to say that if you would like to just tune out and turn off as soon as we end, feel free to. Don't feel like you have to stick around or anything, but if you'd like to, I will be here. So, coming up to sitting then and bringing the hands in front of the heart, we'll close out our practice. I want to thank you for joining me. This was a very meaningful practice for me. I just feel full of love. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from